We're definitely very
Yes.
honored to have you with us this evening. Why don't
Yes.
you give us a little bit of background on your church, on your congregation, what it's like? You were in California. You moved from California to Michigan, so that our audience would get to know you better.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm from Detroit, originally born in Detroit. I started preaching at the age of 17. So I've been preaching for 42 years now, believe it or not.
Bless
I
you.
was called to the ministry at the age of 16,
Bless you.
started preaching at 17, went to Morehouse College where Dr. Martin King Jr. attended school.
Beautiful.
Went to Morehouse College, then went to Africa after graduation, went to Senegal, Gambia, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Egypt, and Israel. Then came back, went to seminary, Colgate Rochester Divinity School, graduated, got married, moved to Los Angeles, worked at UCLA as director of the Black Campus Ministry at UCLA, worked at Wilshire United Methodist Church for 2 years as associate pastor for evangelism, pastoral care, youth, and young adult ministry. Then I became the pastor, the senior pastor of Moriah Baptist Church, was there for 6 years during the Rodney King beating, the riots of 1992. I was there. Mayor Tom Bradley appointed me as a city commissioner for the Civil Service Commission. So I was working at the city. And then 1995, I was called to pastor my hometown church, Greater New Mount Moriah Baptist Church, where my predecessor was Dr. Benjamin Hooks, who was head of the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the oldest civil rights organization in the country, and founded in 1909. And Dr. Hooks was the president of the NAACP for about 15 years, and he was pastor of Greater New Mount Moriah Missionary Baptist Church for 30 years. And I was called to come from Los Angeles to Detroit to succeed him as the senior pastor. So I've been here 25 years. I've been back home for 25 years, and I've done a lot with the Jewish community in Los Angeles and here in Detroit, and also now with the Islamic community. So God has ordained me to be not just a Christian minister, but an ecumenical interfaith bridge builder, to work with my Jewish brothers and sisters, my Muslim brothers and sisters, the Buddhists, the Hindus, the Baha'is, to work with anyone who believes in God. I've worked with Black, white, Latino, Asian American, Chaldean. So I just thank and praise God that He has allowed me to not see religion, not see race or color, to see it, but not to see it, meaning to see it and embrace it, not to use it to divide our people or to put one group above the other, but to recognize that in terms of Christians, Jews, and Muslims, we're all children of Abraham. We all go back to the God of Abraham. And so I'm just honored to be here, and I'll share more as you ask me questions about the Qazwini family and how you've become my family, and I thank God for that.
Thank you very much, Reverend. That's very kind of you. Once again, we're honored to have you here. You've explained to us that you have played an extremely important role in bridging gaps between members of the Abrahamic faiths, Christians, Jews, and Muslims. Why don't you tell us a little more of your relationship, your church's relationship with the Muslim community in Dearborn?
Okay, yeah. With the Muslim community in Dearborn, I first got connected through the Islamic Center of America. I guess Imam Hussain Qazwini, is that your uncle?
That's my uncle.
I believe your uncle, right. He was Imam at Islamic Center of America for a while. Yeah. And so that's when I first met him before he went to Islamic Institute of America. And so I met him probably, it's been many times for the last 25 years. We've worked together on different projects in terms of interfaith. But one of the things that really strikes me is when this guy, Terry Jones, well, he was Terry Jones, decided he wanted to burn the Holy Quran. And I went to Dearborn with other Christian leaders, and we said we would not tolerate that, because if he can burn the Holy Quran, he could burn the Holy Bible or the Holy Torah. And so we went together, Christians, Jews, Muslims, the Interfaith Coalition, and we went and we surrounded, we stood in front of the Islamic Center of America, and we denounced Terry Jones, told him that he could take his racism and Islamophobia and vitriol and take it back to where he came from, because that was not being a man of God. And I don't even recognize him as a reverend. That's why I just said Terry Jones, because I don't recognize him as a reverend. So anyway, that was some of the first days. Back in 2001, actually 19 years ago, when we had the 9/11, we did a World Sabbath service. And I was asked to give the Christian response to the terrorist attack on September 11th of 2001. And at that time, some 19 years ago, I spoke out and I mentioned to those who were in attendance with an interfaith gathering. And I stated that we cannot demonize our Muslim brothers, that terrorists, those terrorists who did the tragic tragedy on 9/11, I basically, I had to speak out in support of my Muslim brothers. And so that was in 2001. Then and I'm just kind of skipping around on different things we've done together. I've spoken at the mosque back when E, my good friend E, brings together chaplains from around the world. They came to the Islamic Center. I spoke there. They've come other places. I spoke there to welcome them to Dearborn, to Detroit, and to show them that Christians can work together. And then when Donald Trump became president and issued the Islamic ban, stating that Muslims could not come into, I mean, all that nonsense, I made it a point to go to the Islamic Center of America, because that's what I was with at the time. I went there on a Friday, and I was by myself. I went by myself. No one else came, just myself. And I went and I spoke there during the Friday prayers. They gave me about 15 minutes for the Friday prayers. And I spoke with them, and I told them that as a person of color, a black man in America who have experienced racism and slavery in America, that I could feel the pain of my brothers and sisters who were now being targeted just because they were Muslim, just like we were targeted just because of the color of our skin. So I went there and I stood to let them know that I denounced Donald Trump then. I denounce him now, 4 years later. And this is why I say that Donald Trump must leave office, because he tries to divide our nation, he tries to divide our people. So I went to purposely let my Muslim brothers and sisters in Dearborn know you have a friend, you have a brother in Reverend Kenneth J. Flowers and the Greater Moriah Missionary Baptist Church, that we're going to be here and stand with you, and we would not tolerate Islamophobia, we would not tolerate bigotry, we would not tolerate this type of nonsense. So then fast forward to last year, then Imam Qazwini invited me to come to the Islamic Institute of America to speak for the Martin Luther King Jr. celebration, to speak in honor of Dr. King, because he had gotten word that I was very, very close to Dr. King's widow, Coretta Scott King. She adopted me as one of her spiritual sons when I was at Morehouse. So I became very, very close to the King family, and knew Mrs. King very well. She was very, very dear to my heart. And I still talk to Martin III as well as Bernice King and Dexter King. And so Imam Qazwini knew about that relationship and asked me to come and speak in honor of Dr. King. And so I spoke last year in January at the Islamic Institute of America, talked about Dr. King and what his dream meant and what we must come together, how we must come together as brothers and sisters and work together. And it was against that backdrop, when I talked about Dr. King, that Imam Qazwini asked me about Imam Hussain and said, you need to learn, have you ever heard about Imam Hussain? I said, no, I've never heard of him. So he gave me a short history of Imam Hussain, and said, "You must go to Karbala." He said, "As I listen to your words of power and justice and freedom," he said, "it reminds me of Imam Hussein and Dr. King, and they're very similar." And that's how it all came. That's how we started talking, and that's how I wound up in Karbala last year. So,
So before we get into your beautiful trip that I heard that you enjoyed to Karbala, I'd like to ask you exactly what you were just describing to us. Imam Hussein has universal values, and his
yes,
values are the values of the religion of Islam, and his values are the values of his grandfather, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon
yes.
them. How do you find similarities between honorable personalities in the Jewish in the Christian faith, such as Jesus, peace be upon him, and other personalities such as Jonah and the dignified prophets in the Christian faith, and their commonalities with the message, with the uprising, and with the legacy of Imam al-Hussein? And how is it that Imam al-Hussein can unite Muslims and Christians in order to fight, for example, the prejudice that you were just speaking about, the racial profiling that you were speaking about, the discrimination that you were speaking about, poverty? How is it that we can come together in understanding the essence of the message of religion? Because you will find people who will divide human beings. You beautifully stated that you feel that God has chosen you to bring members of the Abrahamic faiths, those who believe
Yes.
in God, together in harmony and peace and love and understanding. And how is it that some people would be using religion? Literally, they'll use religion in order to divide people, in order to discriminate against people, in order to shed blood and to wage war. So how is it, number one, where do you find Hussein in the Christian faith? And number two, how is it that Hussein can unite Muslims and Christians today in the world that we live in?
Well, in the Christian faith, as I stated, we had never heard of Imam Hussein. We had never heard of his teachings. At least I had never heard of his teachings. I had heard of the Abrahamic or the Jewish prophets of Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Amos, Isaiah, Hosea, Daniel. I had heard mostly of those prophets. I'd heard of Prophet Muhammad. I'd heard of Ishmael, in terms of Abraham, Ishmael, and how he.
Yes.
And so I had not heard of Imam Hussein. And so from the perspective, he was not and has not been a part of our teachings or our tradition. But as I learned more about him, I could see how he could stand for truth, justice, righteousness, how he stood against tyranny, how he stood against oppression, how he stood against corruption, just as the Jewish prophets of old did, just as Jesus did, just as Dr. King did. And so what I see a common thread is with Imam Hussein, with Amos and Jeremiah and Ezekiel and all the biblical, and then Jesus himself, Paul, the Apostle Paul, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that what you find is those people always relied upon God, their faith in God, and the fact that God sits high above injustice. And Dr. King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Nelson Mandela used Imam Hussein's story and his martyrdom as an impetus for him, that if Imam Hussein could be killed and stand up against oppression and stand up against tyranny, then Mandela felt that he also could stand up against oppression, apartheid, and Dr. King stood up against that. And I've never heard Dr. King mention Hussein as much as he used Mahatma Gandhi and the Hindu faith. So for me, coming through the tradition of Dr. King and Jesus, I had not heard about Imam Hussein. I'd heard more of Gandhi, but then I found out that Gandhi had also been influenced by Imam Hussein, as I learned later. Gandhi, Mandela, they had been influenced by Hussein. And so it lets me know that the common thread that I see through all this is the hand of God. The hand of God being upon the prophet, Imam Hussein, or being upon the imams, being upon the prophets of the biblical Judaic tradition, as well as being upon Dr. King and Mahatma Gandhi and others. So the thread that I see is standing against oppression, standing against tyranny, standing against corruption, but also standing for what is right. Dr. King said, man has not found something he would die for. He isn't fit to live. And Dr. King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That's kind of where I see Hussein, Imam Hussein, that he also stood against injustice and refused to allow himself and his people to come under the rule of oppression and injustice. And so I see God using him in that regard, but I think we need that today.
Reverend Flowers, the question today, obviously with the whole Black Lives movement, Black Lives Matter movement across the globe, you know, this is not something that's just in certain states or only in the United States. This became a movement all around the world where it was due to racism, prejudice against the African American community. And that's something that many people individually stand against, you know, whether it's religious leaders or different people from different backgrounds have individually spoken about such ill behaviors within our society. Today, with this whole COVID-19, you find people wearing masks, protecting themselves against physical illnesses, and forgetting the social illnesses that we find them so convenient, we find them acceptable, and we don't really hear many people take social illnesses or spiritual illnesses like they do, for example, against the physical illnesses. And we make sure that, you know, we protect our borders against any sort of individuals that carry such disease, but we don't protect ourselves, our communities, and our families against bigots and hate mongers. Do you think that we as religious leaders, whether it's Christian leaders, Muslim leaders, Jewish leaders, Hindus, Buddhists, those who believe in humanity, those who believe that God created all men equal and he will judge them equal, and he has not superiorized a race, he has not superiorized a color over others, do you think that we need to work as leaders, not as individuals within our church? You work at your church, we work at our mosques, you speak to your congregation, we speak to our congregation. Do you think we have done enough in order to come together to eradicate such issues within our society? And what is it that we can do to take this a step further?
I personally think, and I know that COVID-19 has precluded us from doing some things now, but I'm of the mindset that I believe that people have to come together. If you look at the civil rights movement of the 1950s, the 1960s, they had mass meetings. They would meet in churches. They would sing songs. They would be inspired and motivated. They would come together, pack those places out, and then they would take to the streets. They would march. They would demonstrate. They would sing gospel songs. They would sing freedom songs, but they were all together on one accord and became a vast army. When Dr. King spoke in 1963, over 250,000 people at the March on Washington, Black, white, Jew, Gentile, Muslim, Christian, I mean, they all came together. And that's because they recognized that the problem did not affect just Black folk, but it affected everyone. It affected the poor whites of Appalachia. It affected whites in our ghettos. It affected Blacks in our northern cities, our northern ghettos, just like Blacks in the Deep South. And so people recognize we must come together. I think now, and this has been something that I've yearned to do with my Muslim brothers and sisters, is for us to come together. I mentioned to your uncle last year, when I came out and spoke at Islamic Institute of America. I said, I look forward to the day when you can come and speak at Greater New Mount Moriah and bring members of the Islamic Institute and bring members of the Muslim community to Greater New Moriah. And so you can speak, so we can come together, do projects together, do different things together. And the sad reality, which I found out is not just a Muslim and Christian thing, but from what I understand, it's a part of many in the Muslim culture in Dearborn, that they don't travel too far outside of Dearborn at Dearborn Heights. And so someone told me that it's hard to get Muslims in Dearborn to travel to Canton. It's hard to get them to travel to other parts of Michigan that's really close by. So they said, so Reverend, don't take offense when they don't come to Detroit. It's not that they're afraid to come to Detroit. It's not that they don't want to come to a black church. It's just that they don't do that much. But I believe if we did not have COVID.
But that's no excuse. That's no excuse. We have to push our community to travel.
I agree. I agree.
Definitely. That's no excuse. If that is the case, which is the case, unfortunately, we need to be vocal, and we need to let them know that, listen, this is a much greater cause than, not driving for 10, 15 minutes, an extra 10, 15 minutes.
Because I believe that once we can get past this pandemic, and then even if we can do events where we can be socially distanced or whatever, I think it is key. This is my perspective in dealing with different groups down through the years, that when people can come together, when people can physically see one another and see the Chaldeans, the Arabs, the blacks, the whites, the Christians, the Jews, the Muslims, and see us coming together, there's power in our numbers. When you see one finger, you see just one finger, two fingers, but you get it all five together, make a big fist. Now you got all of us united as one. That's what it's going to take to let people like Donald Trump know. We will not tolerate this Islamophobia, this blatant racism, this xenophobia. We must come together and let people know that we will not tolerate this kind of stuff.
Definitely. Back to Imam Hussein, before we hear your story and your visit to Karbala and your take on his impact on humanity today, and once again, how he can unite us. Imam Hussein's camp was an extremely diverse one. And within Imam Hussein's camp, there were actually Africans. And within his camp, there was a Christian man. And within his camp, there was the Arab. And within his camp, there were the non-Arabs. And within his camp were the very wealthy people. And within his camp were individuals who had nothing, basically. And the reason why they all joined him was because he didn't differentiate, between his son and the African man who fell as a martyr on the 10th of Muharram. He didn't differentiate between the Christian Wahhab and his own brother. He wanted to stand for justice and equality and freedom of humanity. And that is why Imam Hussein speaks to every soul that is freedom seeking, every soul that honors humanity. And I believe those principles, unfortunately, have been forgotten even by the Muslim community. For us, the majority of the Muslim community who are our Sunni brothers and sisters, obviously, just like Christians are into different denominations, we also have two major denominations, the Shi'i Muslims, the Sunni Muslims. And we feel that they as well have not really truly understood the concept of how Imam Hussein can help us today overcome our difficulties of facing any sort of tyrants. For us Muslims, when we look at Muslim countries, unfortunately, and we find the lack of freedom of speech, lack of freedom of expression, millions of people have to flee their countries. Literally, they would rather drown into the sea than live under a tyrant. What does Imam Hussein teach us? Imam Hussein teaches us that we have to unite and we have to speak against oppression. Now, with that said, even after the 10th of Muharram, when, you know, when Imam Hussein's troops were killed, they were slain, and their heads were going from one city to another, a story tells us, a beautiful story tells us that the man who took the head of Imam Hussein because he wanted to get money for the head of the grandson of the Prophet, and imagine how, you know, all those things, you know, today we look at how some Muslims can behead innocent people in the name of Islam and God, and we're surprised. Many people are surprised, but once you read history, you realize that this happened to the grandson of the Prophet. He was a victim of Islamic terrorism because they had hijacked the religion of Islam. And the grandson of the Prophet was the very first person to speak against this. So this person carrying the head of Imam Hussein didn't want to keep it in any Muslim household, because either they would be very upset, or they would take that head and take it to the so-called caliph of the time so that they could get the money. So what he did was he actually saved this head in a Christian reverend's home, or a priest. And the priest didn't know. He said to him, I'm just going to leave something in your oven. And if you've seen ovens, you know, for those who probably watch ancient movies, oven was a hole that the people made in the middle of the ground, and they would bake bread in there. So he put the head of the prophet's grandson in that oven. And traditions tell us this Christian priest went and he opened the oven in the middle of the night, and he saw this head. Even though it was beheaded, there was blood and dust, but it was full of light. And he could tell this is not an ordinary man. This has got to be a man of God. And he drew his head with the tears, with the blood, with all the dust. And he basically told him the next day that shame on you. You know, shame on you for doing such an act of violence. So Christians felt very close to the message of Imam al-Hussein since the very, very early days, while some Muslims didn't feel sorry for the grandson of their own prophet. Christians stood and they denounced this and they spoke against this, and they were the first people to actually show their love and empathy towards the family of the Prophet Muhammad. So with that said, why don't you tell us what drove you to decide to go to Iraq? I mean, it's not something you see usually, you know, just being a reverend or being the head of a church. Let's put that aside. You're just some guy in Michigan that looks at the news and sees Iraq is not a place you would want to go for vacation. Iraq is not Venice or Rome or Spain. So what motivated you to go to Iraq? And once you arrived there, how did you feel?
The motivation was to learn more about the Prophet Hussein, or Imam Hussein, but also to learn more and to build a better relationship with my Muslim brothers and sisters. I guess you say you have the largest population of Arabs outside the Middle East in Dearborn, and you go to Iraq to build a relationship with your Muslim brothers and sisters. But as I stated, it's hard establishing that fact even in Dearborn, because we're close together, but yet we're so far apart. So when I had to go all the way to Karbala, and when I got there, I was received with open arms. I have never felt such warmth, such hospitality, such love, such an embracing of me and my wife as fellow human beings. They did not see a black man and a black woman. They saw another human being, two men, a man and a woman. They nothing but gracious hospitality. And your cousin Hyder was our tour guide, or the one who was assigned to us. And he was so gracious, so loving, so caring, so kind, that my wife and I adopted him and said, you're going to be our spiritual son. You're going to be our spiritual son. And I told him, I said, there's something powerful about you. I said, He was so young, 18 years of age or whatever. And I told him, I said, for you to be so young, you remind me of when I was 17 or 18, when I was first called to preach God's word. I said, there is a calling upon you. There's an anointing upon you. And I said, I see you as becoming an imam and leading your people. And he told me that that's what he wants to do. He said, how did you know that, Reverend? How did you know that? I said, because I could see it. I could see it in your spirit, in your walk. And that's what I saw everywhere I turned in Karbala. I saw people embracing us. I was not afraid. Now, I'm not going to lie. Before I got there, my wife and I were like, oh, my God, we're going to Iraq. Are we going to get back? My church members were like, Pastor, you don't want to go to Iraq. So Muhammad Qazwini, your cousin, had to come over to my church and speak to my members. And like, he's going to be all right. My family's going to take care of him. He's going to be fine. Because all we see is what you see on the news.
Definitely,
and that
yeah.
Iraq is dangerous. So when I got there, I felt nothing but love. I felt nothing but peace. I felt totally safe. But then when I finally got to the shrine of Hussein, I've never seen such devotion as I saw people weeping and wailing and praying and just wanting to touch the shrine and to go in. It brought tears to my eyes, and I felt the power. So when I got there to the actual shrine, I was told that we could not go in because we were non-Muslims. Right, we were not allowed to go in. And so I stood at the door, and my wife was on the other side because we found out about the separation of the men from the women. Mm-hmm. And so she was on the other side. I was on the side with the men. I didn't go in, but I just stood there and I touched the door or touched the wall. And as I touched that, I felt the power of God. I could feel the presence of God in that place. And I prayed. I said a special prayer, and I thanked God for the life of Imam Hussein. I thank God for all of what he stood for and what his memory and legacy still stands for. And I began to pray for the people of Karbala, the people of Iraq. I prayed for some brothers. And then I also prayed that God would bring these Abrahamic faiths together, Christians and Jews and Muslims, that we will stop fighting and stop killing and we could be together. So I went around to the other side to get my wife. To my surprise, she did not get the memo that you couldn't go in. She was inside of the mosque, laying hands upon the thing, touching it and praying, because she was dressed with her hijab on. And so they thought she was a regular Muslim woman. And she walks in, and I walked there, and she was laying there, and she had her hands touching, and she was praying, and she was thanking God. And she came out, and she was crying and weeping. And I said, you're not supposed to be in there. That's only for Muslims. She said, well, I didn't know. She said, and no one stopped me. She said, but I felt the power. I felt the power of God. So it was just an awesome, awesome experience. And I thought,
Reverend, I need to stop you right here and say something for our viewers, to you and to your respected wife. We believe that Imam Hussein, that Imam Hussein is a martyr for the sake of God, and God in the Quran says that he's alive. So whoever goes to Karbala, we believe, is invited by him personally. And whoever gets there is invited by him. So we don't, I can speak for myself. I don't believe Imam Hussein's shrine, his mausoleum, the closeness to him belongs to Muslims only. It belongs to everybody. And this invitation had come to your wife to be that close to him. That means something to us. That is something we respect. We're nobody to drive people away from Imam Hussein, or people being close to him, or people even praying next to his shrine or touching his shrine or being blessed by his shrine. It's unfortunate that you didn't go as close, and next time I'm sure you will.
Yeah, because I wanted to go in.
Next time I'll make sure that I'm there personally, and I take you by my hand and I take you all the way to the shrine, inshallah.
Yes.
Reverend, let's speak of how you felt afterwards when you came, how your community felt, because if you're done, you can continue, please, to speak about what you felt in Iraq,
No.
because a lot of people, and I'm sure a lot of your community members, a lot of non-Muslims would probably, and Muslims would probably end up watching this somewhere, somehow. The Islamophobia is one thing, and unfortunately, the Shi'i-phobia is one other thing, where, people constantly say, when you were there and you're touching the shrine, why is it some sort of, you worship Hussein, you put Hussein next to God, and you as a Christian leader, as somebody who is not even a Muslim, you said, I touched the door and I felt the power of God. And that's something so powerful for you to say and to understand, which means for hundreds of years, we, the followers of Ahlul Bayt or the Shia Muslims, have stated that the reason why we're there is because we feel the presence of God, because we feel more godly. We pray to God. And you right there and then, you felt that this is a place for me to pray. Nobody had told you, nobody instructed you that once you stand here, pray. But you felt this is a place of prayer. And you prayed there, and you felt that the prayer was acknowledged by God. A lot of people looking at Islam, a lot of people looking at Muslims, their shrines, and some Muslims are guilty of this, to believe that, when we go there, we pray to Imam Hussein and we don't pray to God. It's the role of the media, it's the role of leaders, religious leaders, who constantly misinform their communities about others. We as Muslims, we are, and Shi'i Muslims specifically, we've experienced this at firsthand. We have experienced what it feels like when other people are explaining our faith, when other people are explaining our sect, our school of thought. However, like I said, we sometimes need to do more. And I'm speaking to my community, and I'm speaking to my brothers and sisters now. We need to not fall in the same trap. If I need somebody to speak about, for example, the agony of the African American community, I should speak about it. I definitely should, and I must. But if I want to know the real story, if I want to know what really happened, then you're the man for the job. If I want to know the real Christian values, I need to have a Christian faith leader come and speak to my people, so that they would not remain ignorant about other faiths, about other denominations.
I was surprised and somewhat hurt when I got back from Karbala. There's a fish market I go to here in Detroit, and I get fried catfish and whatever, shrimp and all those things. And when I get there, I happened to tell the guy, I said, I just got back from Iraq. He's like, Iraq? You from Iraq? Yeah. So and I told him that I'd been to visit, and I told him I went to visit the shrine of Hussein. And to my surprise, he was filled with vitriol and anger and resentment, and basically told me, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. He said, those are Shias. And I found out he was Sunni. And I could not believe the disdain. And I'm here, I'm still on a spiritual high. I'm still excited about, I just got back from Iraq. I got a chance to visit. And he just burst my bubble, just like, oh, we don't believe in that. That's a bunch of nonsense, this and that. And I'm like, no, I felt the power of God there. I felt a presence there. And he's like, nah, we don't want to talk about that. We don't talk about that. And it really disturbed me. It disturbed me.
But to be fair, and that is why I have spoken to one of our dear-respected Sunni scholars who has actually given 2 lectures here on the live show, Sheikh Omar Ramadan of the United Kingdom, who gave us the Sunni perspective, the moderate Sunni perspective on Imam Hussein and on the visiting of his shrine. And to those individuals who, for example, the likes of the man who you met at the fish market, I tell them that you have been brainwashed, unfortunately. And it's time for you to pick up a book. It's time for you to go and explore history. The reason why many Muslims left their country was because of bigotry, because of lack of freedom, because they were harassed, because they were tortured, because they were imprisoned. Yet when they come to America, they don't learn better the American values that, listen, Your neighbor could be somebody from Africa. Your neighbor could be somebody from Asia. Your neighbor can be Indian. Your neighbor could be Christian. Your neighbor could be a Jew or an atheist. Doesn't matter. You need to
Yeah.
hear them out. You need to
Right.
respect them for what they believe. We agree to disagree, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's beautiful. But in order for us to live in harmony, in order for us to live in peace, we must be able to overcome such things. I hope that, you know, at least their children, at least the youngsters listening, can employ such teachings and such values. Now, would you want to share with us anything further on your visit to Karbala before we actually honor the victims of 9/11 and we speak of how is it that if the world, because I want to talk about one more thing before you, I want you to tell us more about Karbala and what you experienced there, and then we honor the victims of 9/11. We don't honor them just by a prayer in the end, but we honor them by letting people know that in 9/11, in the attacks, there were Muslims, there were Christians, there were whites, there were blacks, there were Chinese, there were Asians, there were all sorts of people were the target of a terrorist attack. And we need to understand terrorism starts with extremism. Extremism creates hate. Extremism creates division. Extremism leads to such disasters. So when we come together, I believe that the greatest way for us to honor the victims of 9/11 is for faith leaders to come together and speak of their commonalities and to speak against hate and bigotry. So why don't you tell us a little more of your Karbala, and then we'll honor the victims of 9/11. And I think that, you know, our time is also running out, so we only have a window of 1 hour on Instagram. So go ahead and tell us more.
Okay. Let me just say that it was a great experience. I got a chance to go to the Euphrates River. I mean, I've read about it in the Bible, and then to actually go to the Euphrates River, see the Euphrates River, I mean, that was just mind-blowing in and of itself. Then to go to the world's largest cemetery in the world and see all of those graves and all of those tombs, that was powerful. To see all the vendors, to see both of the shrines there in Karbala, then to go to the shrine of I think Ali or Ali, I believe, went to another one.
And Najaf, yes.
Najaf. I went to that shrine. Just to see the sanctity and the way that the Muslims take off their shoes and say that, you know, you're standing on holy ground, the way that you kneel and pray, the devotion, the commitment, the dedication, the peacefulness, the gentleness. This is what I witnessed. I did not see terrorists. I did not see folk fussing and fighting and bickering. I saw people. I saw humanity. I saw peacefulness. I saw a devotion to God. I saw worshiping of God. And I think if we as Christians and Muslims and Jews in America can show that same type of devotion, of commitment to God and to fellow, you know, Jesus teaches us to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, and soul. And then he says to love thy neighbor as thyself. If we're able to love God first and then to love our neighbor as ourselves, there will be no room for racism or anti-Semitism or Islamophobia or bigotry or sexism or classism or poverty, because we would do everything we can to lift each other up. So as a Christian minister, I thank and praise God for the words of Jesus and the words of Dr. King and now the words of Imam Hussein and his life and his legacy and Moses and the others. I thank God because in all of that, I can see what God has in store for me.
You also went to the hospital that, you know, the viewers today, many of them and many people who will watch this were the reason behind the hospital. The hospital has not received any sort of funding from any government or any entity. It's from the people.
Yes. And when I saw Joshua,
anybody who visits Imam
Hussain, took me, and I think we have
honor them by.
Yeah, I had I had open heart surgery in 2015, And I have 6 stents in my heart now. The last 2 I got last year in July after getting back from Karbala. But when I got there and I went to the cardiac unit of that hospital, it touched my heart. When I heard about your grandfather having a heart attack and having the heart surgery, it connected us. I got a chance to meet your grandfather. I got a chance to spend time with the
Wow.
Ayatollah. I got a chance to spend time with him and to be in his library, to be in his office, and to know that we both share heart issues, but yet we have a heart for people, a heart for God. It
Definitely.
connected us. I was just honored and humble. He was so
Wow.
gracious and so kind to meet me and to spend time with me. And I'm just honored. I'm just honored. I know we're out of time, but I just had to say that I appreciate that, and I want to go back to Karbala.
Absolutely, absolutely. And do you recommend that anybody who's not Shia Muslim or anybody who's not Muslim or other Christian leaders, other Jewish leaders, what would your message be to them in terms of visiting the holy city of Karbala?
I think it will open their eyes to see a different perspective of Islam. It'll open their eyes to see a martyr who gave his life based upon his belief in God, but also his belief in fighting against tyranny and oppression and injustice. A man that stood for humanity, a man that stood for love and peace and brotherhood and sisterhood, a man that tried to unite humanity. And I think they will see the people's devotion to that principle, not to the man, but to that principle of what he stood for. And I think if Christians, Jews, Muslims, whomever will go there, I think they will come away feeling the same way that my wife and I felt, renewed, refreshed, and revived.
Very well, very well. Reverend Flowers, we would like for you to, uh, I'm sure that you honor the victims of 9/11 every single year. Today, you've graciously accepted our invitation to be with us. So I would like for you to uh, also honor them, honor those victims by speaking to us of what it is that we can do in order to eliminate such crimes, such injustice, and what is it that if we do can 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 create more love and peace around the world versus acts of terrorism and violence.
Well, the first thing we must do is get Donald Trump out of office. That's the first thing, because he continues to divide us. He continues to lie to the world, to the American people. And so he continues to spew hatred and violence and vitriol. So that's the first thing. Second of all, we must pray that God will intervene in human history now, just as he intervened through the Prophet Muhammad, through Jesus, through Imam Hussein, through Dr. King, through others, that God will intervene and use leaders such as ourselves, use us to come together and speak love, speak peace, speak togetherness, have classes on diversity, have classes where we can start with our young people, because children are not born to hate. They are taught to hate. Children will play together regardless of the color of their skin, their faith, or whatever. They will all play together. So we need to develop a childlike spirit where we can learn to accept people for who they are and recognize that we are all children of God. If we begin teaching them at an early age, then we'll grow up into a world what Dr. King called the beloved community, where there's love, justice, peace, brotherhood, sisterhood, togetherness, and there'll be no room for terrorism, racism, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, or vitriol, but we can learn how to live together, and there'll be no more need for terrorists to try to destroy us, but we can live together as brothers and sisters under God.
Definitely. And I would like us to conclude this session with a prayer for many people. Let me list them. First are the ones who are in the front lines fighting COVID-19, this
Yes.
unfortunate pandemic, the healthcare professionals, the doctors, the physicians, those who have actually fallen ill to this virus, those who are hospitalized today, those who are suffering all around the world with poverty, those who are hurting within their families, within their communities, those who are discriminated against, those who are suffering in prisons while they're innocent. I said in one of my tweets, and I think some people misunderstood me living in the Middle East, but I firmly believe in this. Some people end up burning the flag of the United States in protest of Donald Trump. And I say to them, listen, Donald Trump does not represent the American flag or the American people. The American people are much better than this. If you burn the flag, you're disrespecting all of the American people. People who love this flag, people who are willing to give their lives for this flag. That does not, this man does not represent every American. In fact, many people who voted for him are now saying, we wish we never voted for him. So I pray, my biggest prayer tonight, while I honor the victims of 9/11, is the foundations on which America were based on, and why this country is loved and revered by its citizens. Those things are what we cherish. Those things are what will actually keep America great. And hopefully America will be great again once everybody feels equal, once everybody feels safe, when nobody feels that they will be victimized because of their skin color or their name or their religion. So my biggest prayer tonight, in order to honor the victims of 9/11, is I pray that America is great again, and I pray that America remains great, and may God bless America and the land that gives us the opportunity to come together in such a way to speak, a Muslim, a Christian, to speak freely without having to be scared of being judged, of political or racial profiling. And I hope that many people will wake up and understand the true American values.
Well, I pray for America to be great. America's already a great nation, but when we say words "make America great" or "make America great again," it's my view and the view of many others that that's code for "make America white again."
Yeah,
because
that's what he meant.
When we say "make America great again," then we must ask the question: when was it great? Was it great when we had slavery?
Exactly.
Was it great when we had
Couldn't agree more.
Jim Crow laws? Was it great when we had So I'm very careful when I use that term, "make America great" or "make America great again."
I basically meant it in a way that what he meant was the exact opposite of what we are trying to achieve.
Exactly.
America is only great when it sticks to its values, when it practices its values.
When we come together.
So now, today, what he has done is not making America great. Once he's out of office, like you said,
then we can come together, America great.
Then it will be great again. Definitely. This is what I was trying to get across to my viewers. And I really do hope that people understand America is much more beautiful when everybody feels safe, not just a certain group of people.
And justice for all, not just all white men, but for all people, races, colors, creeds, religions. That's my prayer.
We're going to have to bother you again, and we're going to have to ask you to join us again. I'm sure the audience loved for you to be here. I certainly did. I enjoyed every moment. And God bless you. God bless your family. I hope you're going to stay safe.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll get to see you soon.
And I will be honored to come on your program again.
All right, brothers and sisters, I'd like to thank every single one of you for joining us this evening. We had a very, very beautiful session with Reverend Kenneth Flowers, who joined us all the way from Detroit, Michigan. And he had visited the city of Karbala. Thank you very much for joining us, brothers and sisters. May Allah bless you all. Keep safe. And wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.